Welcome to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast, a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute. I'm your host, Doug Stewart, and I have with me today John Papola, who is a father, filmmaker, serial entrepreneur, and the CEO and founder of the Emergent Order Foundation, a nonprofit studio dedicated to heroic storytelling that embodies classical virtues and promotes a culture of American freedom. Love that. He is known for his work with Russ Roberts on the Keynes Hayek rap videos and is the creator of a new project, Dad Saves America. John, thanks for joining me.
So happy to be on the show.
Yeah. You and I have been connected through a number of people in the libertarian world. And we've been friends on Facebook. And I was telling you off air that I've always enjoyed how you post things. Like recently, it's all about the inflation in the Fed. You post a few things on Facebook that I was just like, you know what? You might be a little agitated, but like you have this genuine care for society and your country and for, you know, the well-being of people. And you really care that the government is encroaching upon our human flourishing and our well-being. And so you are the kind of person that I love to have conversations with and just sort of either pick your brain or just sort of get your take on some things, because I think what you have to say is very, offers a lot to people. But how did you get into doing what you do? I mean, you are a film producer. You've made documentaries. You've made very famous rap videos with an economist, which is just so awesome to have on your record. I'm sure you want to be known in the libertarian world as more than just the guy who did the rap videos, but
it's
just
okay
tell us how you got into this. You what?
I was going to say the Keynes versus Hayek rap videos will be on my tombstone, and I've more than made peace with that fact.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, what we're doing now with Dad Saves America is a return to the underlying motivations that got me into this work in the first place. Because, a story I've shared many times is my wife and I, Lisa, got married. We were working together at Nickelodeon. We moved to Hoboken. We had our son. Well, she did most of the work on that, to be sure, and all the work. And
well, you drove her to the hospital, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. No, I've always had the mornings, and so we've always had very much a 50-50 strategy when it comes to parenting. So I love spending time with my family. But my family was the centerpiece of my concern, because in the face of the financial crisis and then all the crazy stimulus programs that followed and Occupy Wall Street and this popularization of a call to return to the socialism discussion, which seemed like it should have been relegated to the 20th century where it belongs, happily murdering hundreds of millions of people, as socialism likes to do. I felt called to put my skills to use, trying to promote freedom, trying to promote, classical liberal principles, the principles of the founding, the principles of the Constitution. However imperfectly they might have been expressed in American history, there's never been a better articulation of the Western sort of philosophical and moral canon than America's founding principles. And so that really was the motivation for everything. That's what motivated the creation of the Keynes Hayek rap videos. That's why I reached out to Russ Roberts while I was, working at Spike TV as a creative director. It's why I left Spike and moved to Austin, Texas to start working on videos and films that matter to me and that advance the principles and the virtues that I think are essential to human flourishing. And it's why we're doing what we're doing now with Dad Saves America, trying to draw attention to this essential role that we play as fathers and provide a positive aspirational voice and alternative to a culture that has largely turned its back on men and on fatherhood, both sort of narratively and physically, because we now lead the world in fatherlessness. So the cultural background, has a real boots on the ground impact on our society. And I think it's deeply destructive. And I want to do something positive in response. I want to do something creative in response to the destruction.
What do you how do you react when you hear people use the term toxic masculinity?
Well, you know, so much of my response to toxic masculinity as a term and the broader like anti-male um narrative,
Hmm.
I hear through the lens of being a dad and having a son. And what really got me going was seeing that language presented to my son in 6th grade. He's 10. He doesn't have anything toxic about his inherent nature or about
Mm.
his, latent masculinity. That's just he's trying to figure it out for himself. What does it mean to be a boy, to be a man, to be a person? And to present something that is inherent and inborn as being like fundamentally deeply flawed at the root, which is what that phrase really ends up being. It really is ultimately pretty indistinguishable from just saying masculinity is toxic.
Hmm.
Um, that I just can't help but revile that phrase. Now, is there toxic behavior? Yes. Yes, there's toxic behavior. Are men toxic? Yes. Are women toxic? Yes.
Mm.
Have I seen men do aggressive, sort of ape-like behavior? I mean, I watched Goodfellas with Mateo pretty recently, and at the end, he was just shocked, and he's like, because they, a slight altercation in that movie leads to murder.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you think? I'm funny? Next thing you know, you're being murdered. And Mateo's response was, they're like apes.
Mm.
It's a total like, stimulus response situation.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no filter. And sure, that's obviously a toxic behavior, but there's nothing inherently toxic about whatever we want to call masculinity, the set of traits that constitutes, on average, being a man, or however you want to define it. I think it's just part and parcel with this broader identity politics, uh, agenda, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned. And
Yeah.
you were here in Austin. Uh, UT, University of Texas, had these signs up, you know, masculine UT. And it was all these ways to not be a toxic male. And they all sounded like, don't be a man. And, you know,
Masculine you wow, that's a
masculine
stretch
UT. Yeah,
actually. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great, great, great. It's the crack creative team at UT. Um, the other thing I can't help but say is I did work at like this first network for men, Spike TV, for 7 years.
Yeah.
And the thing that was so funny about working at Spike was that it was filled with family men. It was actually the probably the most warm, loving environment of any of the um, workplaces I had been in prior to starting Emergent
Mhm.
Order. Like we
That's not the
were
impression one would get though.
no, no, no. Um, it was definitely more Maxim magazine than GQ as a channel. But in terms of the actual culture at Spike, and it wasn't perfect, but it was actually pretty great. And that's like a kind of a perfect example of how all this rhetoric doesn't bear any resemblance to the average experience most people have.
Mm. Yeah. As a dad, I have found it sometimes difficult to know exactly how to instill values in my kids in a way that is somewhat appealing to them. Like, you know, every now and then, like my kids were homeschooled for a time, and when my wife was like going through history stuff, and they would talk about a certain portion of history that had to do with like I think it might have been the Great Depression or whatever it is. And like, I'm in the next room and they're like, Dad, go away. Cause I know that if you like jump into this conversation, like they don't want to hear me like rant and rave or whatever. I mean, how have you worked to instill values in your son that he's willing to hear? I mean, I'm sure it's more than just, a particular tactic, but just share some of your thoughts there.
It's so hard. I so I'm probably more lecturous than I should be. I like to get on my soapbox with my son and talk to him about the world.
Yeah.
I always have been. Um, since he was little, I've talked to him pretty far above what was probably his likely capability. When he was a little baby, I baby talked with him, but as soon as he could speak, it was kind of like, all right, time to
And the
start
Fed.
talk. Yes, yes. Let's talk about nominal income targeting instead of interest rates. Um, eh, so I think I don't know if that's effective or not, but it's certainly the route I took.
Mhm.
I do think that I think the biggest role we play in influencing our kids ends up being the behavior we model, not what we say, but it's like everything in life, right? It's not what we say that really matters, it's what we do. And so I think it's it's that behavior that ends up being the biggest lesson we teach our kids.
Mhm.
And I was reminded of that recently because my uncle Bill passed away very suddenly, which has been very difficult. And so, I've been emotional for the past couple weeks. And I was driving with Mateo and Lisa, and I had said that I broke down in front of some of our team. And I just had a rough day thinking about my uncle. And Mateo said to me, Pop, you've shown me that it's okay to be emotional as a man. And I really appreciate that.
Mm.
And that's probably as close to a perfect lesson as any I've ever been able to give to him. And it's not been a lesson. I have actually told him that with words, but um, him actually getting to see that I'm comfortable crying, comfortable letting my emotions out. I think one of the things, this kind of dovetails with this concept of toxic masculinity in a certain sense. So, I think we all want to have healthy psychology. We want to live a life that's rich and full, and that means being in touch with our emotions. And I think
Mhm.
men process emotions on average differently than women on average. Um, and so um, having permission to be emotional and let that be part of your identity and not think that, well, I'm a man, I have to tough it up. I should always be stoic no matter how I feel. That says who? Like, that's not the way. Um,
Yeah.
that's not what I consider to be being a healthy person. So that's a lesson I've taught my son just by being an emotional person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely kind of weird that people have that um over I use it was a word that I kind of recently heard by listening to a podcast about what could be considered a type of toxic masculinity. They use the word overexpressed masculinity, and I was just like, huh, interesting. It's like you take that up and you crank it to 11, and somehow that means that you can't cry because you're at that sort of peak volume, and you can't vary what it is that you're, how it is that you're being a dad or a man or whatever. So I hear you that that's kind of a confusing thing for to think that it's that someone would actually say, well, to be a man means that you got to withhold from emotion publicly or even in front of your family. That's pretty ridiculous.
I mean, one of the lessons, the things I've tried to instill in my son, um, in terms of things I've told him, are very philosophically rooted. So from an early age, I've told him the world doesn't care about him because the world is not a being that can care. God can care about him and love him. I can care about him and love him. They're his friends and colleagues and his future spouse and his mother. And there are people who can care about him, but the world is just the world. The world doesn't care about fairness because stars explode. It's
Hmm.
just the way it is. So what is and isn't fairness and what is and isn't justice have been things I've tried to make him sensitive to,
Mm. Yeah.
because I know he's going to get those messages early and often. And a lot of those messages are deeply, deeply confused.
Mm. Yeah. You know, one thing that I sort of struggle with my kids is knowing when to introduce them to what's wrong with the world. Because we I think it was back in I think it was in 2008. We cut cable. We were just like, all right, we're not gonna pay for cable. And for a little while, I got my news in a humorous way by watching The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. I gave up that when he left. But that's kind of how I knew what was going on in the world generally. Because I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna. I took a playbook from Isaac Morehouse and said, just don't pay attention to it all, right?
Yep.
And my life got tremendously better, but my kids were really little, and my oldest right now is 14, and he's becoming a little bit more aware of the world through friends and things. But my kids don't really know about terrible things happening other than like as a historical lesson. Like they know about the Holocaust and some things like that. But introducing them to a world where they have to understand that they will be offended, and like what you said, that the world doesn't care about them, that's been a challenge for me. And it's been a struggle for me and my wife to be like, all right, well, how much do we shelter them to protect them for a little while they're still becoming of age in such a way that they can have the fortitude and strength to to fight it internally, right? Instead of being
Yeah.
snowflakes. And I don't use that word lightly. That's I think that's a technical term now. So I
It's a
wasn't
matter
using
of
that
social
pejoratively.
science. Yes.
Yes, right. It is now, right? Um, so, I mean, do you talk to your kids about? I mean, you probably just sort of said that you kind of try to lecture, and that's. I mean, I feel like I'm in good company now that a dad like you also is prone to lecturing. Um, what have you done to sort of introduce them to the types of things that they have to prepare for in life? Because at some point, you can make it as fair as you can as a parent to some extent, but once they're gone, life isn't going to make it fair the way dad and mom tried to do it.
Well, this is in so many ways, this is like the essential ethos I'm trying to promote with our YouTube channel and with Dad Saves America. Because I think that the challenge we face as parents is, how do we set up our kids to survive and to thrive after we're gone? That's the painful, sort of tragic reality of being a parent, is
Mm.
we want our kids to outlive us and be happy and successful, and to have kids of their own who will outlive them. And so it just raises, I think, a way I can answer your question is to say, what steps do we have we tried to take, me and Lisa, um, to set our son up to be robust, or anti-fragile, to use the Nassim Taleb
Mhm.
term, which I like a
Yeah.
lot and that we reference in some of our videos. Um, you can look no further than our son's knees, because they are covered in scars. And the reasons for that stem in part from choices we consciously made. So at from an early age, and Lisa was great about this, and you need to marriage is always a partnership of equals, bringing our complementary capabilities and temperaments to the table, right? So, but Lisa and I had a couple uh, basic rules, and we were just talking about this the other day, because one of the places we got this was actually from the old show Super Nanny. So if you've ever seen, so
No.
Super Nanny was like this reality show where this like English nanny would come to a dysfunctional house where the kid was a psychotic brat and fix it. And she had basically like one trick, and it was um, follow through on your threats. And the subset of that is, don't make threats you can't follow through on, as a disciplinarian.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't stop it, I'm going to take away your computer for a month. It's like, well, are you going to do that? Because if you're not going to take it away for a month, don't threaten it, because kids are really smart and they learn quickly that you're full of shit. So, so that was a rule we had. Okay, we will not make idle threats, and we will also always present a united front. So then the other thing that really I have to credit Lisa with, because she was home with Mateo more. She stayed home after he was born. She went back to work uh, briefly, and then realized that she didn't want to be apart from him when he was little. So she didn't really start working again until we started Emergent Order. Um, when he would, go crazy and get, be a 3-year-old, which is like a little psychotic person, if he acted in a way that was just like a baby and trying to get attention and being annoying and being loud and obnoxious, she would deprive him of attention. She wouldn't lean into that. She would actually turn her back to him and just say, "No, I don't like that," and just literally turn away. And similarly, when he would get hurt, if it wasn't really a problem, we would not really acknowledge it. Because kids will,
Hmm.
you can watch the dynamic with little kids. They'll fall and they'll start to cry. And then if you rush in, "Oh, honey, oh, baby, are you okay? Oh, 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 oh," like they love it. They suck into that. They lean into it. They
Yeah.
start wailing. But if you're like, "Oh no, you're good, you're great. Let's go. Let's do something else." They
Yeah.
they realize, "Oh, I'm surviving. I'm fine."
Yeah. Yeah.
And that basic lesson, I think, has carried through all of our parenting, which is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So when when our son comes home covered in scrapes and scratches, um, or we send him to a school. In the case of when we moved to Austin, we sent him to the Austin Waldorf school, which would basically let him run around like a crazy person and fall out of trees every other day. We made that choice. We wanted him to have that experience. We wanted him
Yeah.
to physically, viscerally experience surviving pain. It's the survival of the pain. It's the
Yeah.
I'm okay. Oh, I was scared to do that. I did it. Oh, I got hurt, but I also learned, okay, I'm going to do it again, and now next time I'm not going to be hurt. That stuff, that's where all the action is to me.
Yeah. Yeah, a trick. It's interesting that your wife sort of had that sort of take on things with with the attention and stuff. Because my wife, she's a psychologist, and she kind of taught me a few things in her training about you just don't let the kids get attention, especially if it's like tantrum inducing, or they're in that sort of
Mhm.
state of creating attention for themselves. But even when there was a serious injury in a way that was that did need attention, like, oh, I'm really sorry that happened to you, whatever, it was as if she partnered with the child, observing the pain that that they're experiencing, rather than making the child the complete object of like pity and like, again, we're loving and attentive, right? But like, it was almost like, hey, this happened to you, and we can get through it, and you can get through it,
And,
even if it was serious.
and it's none of this is to say, we in any way like deprived our son of affection. I mean, we're Italian. It was like we've probably heaped excessive amounts of doting and attention and affection on our son,
Yeah.
even to this day. Um, but it's funny when little side note, when my mom tells the story of when I was little. I was always pretty artistic, and I used to draw. And she went to the preschool teacher and said, my son is actually seems like he's really pretty advanced at drawing. Is there anything we can do to help him with that and encourage that? And the teacher, if you can call preschool people teacher, uh, said, "Oh, all Italian mothers think their kids are so special and so talented."
Oh, that's
which,
great.
which is like the worst thing you could say to my mother ever. Like I can picture her. It's like that is the thing that would turn her into Voltron.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's
That's
like,
crazy.
how? Wait, you're both criticizing my parenting and my child and being Italian. And all
All
four
wrapped
of
up
the
into
head.
one.
Yeah, there was like suddenly like the action streaks are coming by. And I was
Yeah.
like, so she went turned into an anime character within seconds of that being said.
Ah, there we go.
Um,
That's crazy. So, you have this new channel called Dad Saves America, and I watched the introduction, or trailer, I guess you might call it, and I encourage our listeners and viewers to do the same because it really sets forth sort of your vision, which is that there is an important element to American life that has been lost that needs to be recovered. And I want to preface the next question. Well, I have like a question that I want to ask before I ask that. I want you to explain why you love your country because I think it's very reasonable for someone to be as anti-state and government intervention and all of this as you and I are probably pretty equally, aligned there.
mhm.
Um, and also love your country because there's a way that you can love your country without being a sort of MAGA Trump nationalist. And because I don't think you're any of those things. So, yeah. Anyway, why do you love America? Would be the short question.
Well, um, I mean, I think the first reason why I love America is because she's been incredibly good to me and the people I love. I mean, you all you have to do is talk to people or travel at all, and you'll realize that there's no guarantee that you'll be born into a place that will allow you and your family to thrive. There's a
Hmm.
lot of people born into circumstances that are truly catastrophic, and and they can put all the effort of the world into um, trying to thrive, but that the barriers and the obstacles standing in the way are genuinely systemic.
Hmm.
And I think this country, first of all, has gone about as far as one could conceive in trying to dismantle the actual barriers to individual success. Maybe even to the point of actively harming people by, um, you know, overcorrecting. Now, that's not to mean everything's perfect, but you know, it says the world that um, immigrants to the United States outperform native-born Americans in income, in career achievement, in educational
Hmm.
attainment. Sort of, if you want to love America, all you have to do is speak to first generation immigrants to this country, and you will learn why America deserves your love because they chose to come here and they're thriving by and large. And they're like the fundamental fabric of the American enterprise.
Hmm.
Um, my great great grandparents are testaments to that. Well, I guess it's my great grandparents technically, and they did the same thing. They came here as kids from poor backgrounds in southern Italy with, you know, no opportunity to thrive. They came to a country where they would be mocked in large measure and treated like second class citizens in the culture because, turn of the century, Italians were not regarded in high esteem as a immigrant group like virtually every other immigrant group. We all kind of have our wave of coming in and being treated like, you know, marauding barbarians. Oh, you with your raving Catholicism and your hot-headedness and your knives and your mafia and all this stuff. Um, and they've thrived. And they didn't have to thrive. There was no guarantee that they were going to thrive. So I think the fundamental concepts of the country are beautiful and sound. The notion that people have an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that right stems not from government itself, but from our nature as a creation of God. And maybe you don't believe in God, but it's within our nature as human beings. I believe it comes from the soul because if you look out into the animal kingdom is just a brutal desperate world of murderous inequality at every turn where your throat's going to be ripped out by whoever happens to be slightly stronger than you. So the idea that equality is in any sense
Yeah.
natural defies the basic observation of reality. Um, I mean, that's beautiful stuff. That's the realization of the West. It's the triumph of the best of what the human enterprise has been able to gather as far as insights go. And now, of
Yeah.
course, we're trying to regress back to the disgusting old ways of identity politics, which is as old as time immemorial. Oh, you're different than me. I hate you. It's like, you're different. You look like other people I don't like. Therefore, I am going to treat all of you as the same. Like, this is about the most
This is, yeah.
unevolved, brutish, you know,
Yeah.
ape man activity, to go back to the way my son talked about the people in Goodfellas. you
Yeah. Yeah.
know, this is
In,
not the way humans should treat each other, and this is not the American way.
well, and there's been a shift in the way in which we talk about the problems of, how America throughout its history didn't live up to its own ideals, or
Mhm.
it took a long time to do so. Because if you look at even as late as Martin Luther King Jr., he was citing, the inalienable right to life, liberty, and happiness, and equality as one of the reasons for his marches and for his platform. And now those things are sort of seen as just the white man's way of keeping people down, or whatever that's supposed to mean. And it's like, hold on here. There's a fundamental shift in our attitudes about what constitutes um, good, not only good governance, but good like societal norms, societal agreements. It really troubles me that free speech is under attack, in such a way that it can be under attack. Like, you'd think that you'd get that free speech might be attacked, and then people would kind of like shut it down. It's like, well, of course we need free speech, and then those people would go sit down and shut up. But no, people are kind of like, oh yeah, maybe free speech is violence, or something crazy. Like, it's getting a foothold in the minds of our youth that free speech is dangerous, and it's those kinds of things that I think they're very insidious and need jettisoned, right? And that kind of leads me to the next thing I want to talk to you about. Is it does seem your title is provocative in one way, even though for most of us it'd be like "Dad Saves America." That sounds like a fun, family friendly title. But I could imagine a type of feminist being really offended by your title.
Well, look,
Like, who do
there's
you think you are, John? You're going to
right.
save America, right?
What about mom? What about mom? Does mom save America? What about insert not dad? Doesn't that also save America? Yeah, this is the number one sort of question, criticism. Even people that like it have asked of me. What about not dad? Um, my simple answer is that that's not what we're doing. I'm not doing Mom Saves America. I'm doing Dad Saves America, and so that's what we're talking about. We're talking to dads because dads don't have enough voices out
Mm,
there promoting their role as being essential, as being heroic, as being fundamentally moral, as being important. And there are an enormous number of groups and organizations dedicated to everyone else, every other group. There are not many devoted to dads and devoted to men more broadly. And it's partly, I think, because men aren't as good, to be perfectly honest, at expressing our feelings and at coming together
mm.
and at seeking community. Our stoicism sometimes gets the best of us. But I also think that we are, on average, more inclined to be fixers. And by that, I mean, I will speak just personally, but I think it does apply generally. I have screwed up in the way I interact with my wife on numerous occasions. And one of the most steady ways that I will screw up is that I will misinterpret wanting to be heard with a call for me to do something, for me to take action. And I will go one step further. So if Lisa she just wants to talk, she wants to hear, she wants to vent her feelings, she wants to work out her thoughts, she wants to engage. And I will quickly move to, well, wait, what am I supposed to do? Well, isn't this, what are you asking me to do here? How can I fix this? How can I solve this problem? Let me,
Yeah.
and then like when there isn't a clear thing for me to do, this is where I really go to being a complete moron. Um, I'll be like, well, why did you tell me if there wasn't anything I could do to fix it? if you didn't want me to fix it, why did you tell me
Yeah.
in the first place?
As
And-
my son says, and like,
And
okay,
this
why,
is-
what?
This is a posture. This is I think this is a I don't have a fully formed notion of what it means to be a man and what is masculinity. Honestly, I don't. But I do think it's an inclination to be action oriented. And I do think that that is masculine. And I think that that makes us less community driven. We care about things, not people, on average.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that that's one of the things I'm trying to enter into the void that creates with Dad Saves America, because I do
Yeah.
think there's a lot of men out there, like myself, who feel like, well, gosh, aren't we supposed, like, what can I do that's good? Am I so terrible?
Yeah,
It's like
there's
you
a
look
bit
at,
of culture set against you out there in a way.
it's like everywhere you go, you look at every image now is being filtered essentially through Madison Avenue. And I don't mean that literally, although it is kind of literal.
Hmm.
But it's like, you walk into Best Buy and there's help wanted signs. And there's no white men on the help wanted signs. It's like you really like, okay, so first of all, we're in Austin, Texas, which is weird as a city because it's like 75% white, which is weird. Moving here from New York, I was like, and I still feel kind of a longing for more diversity than we have in this city. It's a kind of weirdly white city. But you just think on the basis of, okay, who is likely going to work at Best Buy in the Geek Squad? And that person is not on the help wanted signs because they were filtered through this lens of like diversity means anyone but me.
Yeah. The corporate geek heads are in the cities that are more diverse or not diverse at all in certain ways.
And I don't fault that. I don't think that that's inherently evil. In fact, I did that. I worked in commercials. I did diversity-based casting intentionally for a decade. So I understand it very tangibly what it means to try to represent a broad range of your audience in your creative works. And when every single person is thinking that, what you end up with is something that doesn't even remotely represent reality. But that's okay. Even that's okay. I think the problem is that's like a symptom of a deeper zero-sum game, which is to say, if we want our girls to succeed, we have to they have to do it at the expense of our boys.
Hmm.
And that's the root of the question, why not Mom Saves America? It's this inbred, reinforced zero-sum mentality, which says, if you're saying Dad Saves America, you're implying Mom doesn't. Because there can only be one. It's like the Highlander. If Jeff Bezos has all that money, he took it from somebody. It's like, well, that's not how the world actually works. That's like how children think the world works.
Yeah.
In reality, Mom can save America, and Dad can save America, and you can save America. And anybody that really cares about the country's principles and really has goodness in their heart and wants people to succeed and wants to do it as peacefully as possible can play a role in helping save America. I want to talk to dads. So that's why it's called Dad Saves America.
Well, and if you had made a show, Mom Saves America, they're going to be like, John, you're a dad. Why would you, who do you think you are to create a show? Like you wouldn't be able to win either way. So I'm glad you're pressing in with what you know how to do. And of course you're not, it's not zero sum in your mind, of course.
That is a part of it. And I have to say this, Really, the best answer to the question is I actually started this journey off thinking about parenting. And it was my wife, Lisa, who said, "You care about being a dad more than anything else in the world. That has always been true. You should focus this on dads." It wasn't actually my first impulse to focus on dads. It was my wife. It was Lisa, my partner in everything, who said to all of us at Emergent Order, we should focus on dads. It's like we got an office full of dads. Um, it's authentic. It's true to who you are, speaking to me, and to who a lot of our staff is, though we have a diverse staff. So there, mom said, "Let's have dad save America." How's that?
Yeah, there you go. That's what the mom told me to do. I'm just
Like
listening.
any good dad, I just listened to my wife.
That's right. So, this is a question I want to ask people who are thoughtful about the ideas of harm and aggression and the way in which we treat violence. And this might be a little bit of a tangent here, but it's kind of on my list to talk about. And we're about out of time, and I would be remiss not to ask you, what is your thoughts on the sort of idea that, if my son comes over to your house and, this is a terrible example because my son wouldn't be able to do this, beat up your son, right? He punches your son or does something to aggress upon him physically. Everyone would say, well, that's a trespass of some kind, right? That's a
Sure.
we're morally obligated to, rectify that or punish him or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And yet, if my son is using verbal language to humiliate your son or to do something that is going to affect his psyche in, let's not say, minor ways, we we don't tend to traditionally think of that as physical harm, and so most people, most libertarians, don't see that as qualifying as aggression. And we have the generation, I've read The Coddling of American Mind, and it
Mhm.
is actually, when I read it, I was like, yeah, this is really good, but like, really, this problem is that bad? And then as the years went on since that, I'm like, oh wow, they were really right, unfortunately. And so you can develop skills as you can develop skills in your children. You can help your children develop skills, I should say, to sort of fight off those kinds of things and to fight off, to ward off the sort of pain that it causes. But it does cause pain, and there's neurological ways that that affects us. And so, if words can harm us mentally, can that be? Where's the line between whether it's physical aggression because our mind and our brain is, there's that gray area of what counts as, actually affecting our bodies? I mean, being locked down in 2020 and not able to go see your friends at school was not, I mean, yes, that was physical, but it was also the emotional toll that we're all talking about right now. We all know that there's emotional isolation and things like that. I know you're not a neuroscientist. I don't even, maybe you've studied this directionally, but I just want to kind of get a sense of somebody who I think is smart and intelligent, has really thought through these kinds of things. I don't know. What's your take on that sort of difference?
Well, I'll say that what we're doing at Dad Saves America is very heavily influenced by the coddling of the American mind.
Mm,
And in some ways, like I'd say that what we're trying to do is stand up what I think is essentially the missing component of that book, which is that book identifies this weak minded infantile behavior that's now taking place, not just in college campuses, but now in HR departments and throughout the society. This sort of
hmm
let me act like a baby, let me allow my emotions to dictate my actions without any filtration or second thought. That's how babies act. Babies just cry when they're hungry. They don't stop and think because they're a baby. And that's what college students do when they go onto Yale's campus and say, "This is not a safe space for intellectual, this is my home." It's like, no, it's a school. It's an intellectual discourse space. That's exactly what it is by definition. That's the point. Um, there is a thing called bullying that can be taken to a place that can leave psychological scars. That is true. I don't know where the line on that is. I don't know that anyone could define that line. And I don't think that that line could be fixed because how we respond to our circumstances is in large measure up to us, not up to our surroundings.
Hmm.
And, a good friend of mine was bullied fairly brutally through his entire childhood and ended up turning out to be the CEO of Whole Foods Market and is one of the most loving, but also fiercely competitive people I know. And he would say that bullying played a role in toughening his mind and setting his sights on where he could really be awesome and excellent and learning how to inoculate yourself from that. And so I would say, and I had the same thing happen. When I was 10, we moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania. We moved from an area that was very Italian to an area that was not very Italian. And I actually got pretty mercilessly bullied for being hairy like an ape. I mean, I have hair on parts of my fingers and toes where it's like I didn't even know hair could grow there. So I was made
Well,
fun
you
of.
did, but the rest of us didn't.
Yeah, I knew. I knew that. Like, look, I understand evolution because I can see it when I look in the mirror. But I was bullied pretty continually, and bullied during the times that are especially difficult, like middle school. Middle school is like really a torture chamber. Um, so now, am I just more tough minded and I was able to overcome it? It felt pretty bad at the time. Um, are some people going to be unable to overcome that? Is it because of the bullying? Is it because they don't have the other support in their life to sort of see the goodness and rebuke the negativity? I don't know the answer to that. So I don't think it's an easy. I think you're asking a really important question. I will say this. I think our culture fundamentally has overcorrected. So wherever that line actually is, and there is a line where you, as a parent, need to intervene. There is psychological torture that's
Hmm.
real, and kids can be brutal, and you have to be on guard for that. But we're so far past that line. It's sort of like the really the degeneration of the use of the word white supremacist. So it used to be that if somebody was a white supremacist, I mean, they were like a member of the KKK. They were David Duke. They were, you know, various former senators that the president used to buddy up with. Now it's like if you like math, you're contributing to a culture of white supremacy. Or according to the Smithsonian, if you believe it's useful to get to a place on time, that's contributing to a whiteness culture. So everybody with more than 3 brain cells and who's actually well intended and loves their fellow man recognizes that that's nuts. That the line has gone way out there onto
Yeah.
now everything's included. Now everything's white supremacy. And now I think the same thing's happened with bullying. Now everything's bullying. And
Yeah.
now I have to immediately intervene. And now I have to hover over my kid on the playground. And the second they get into any kind of altercation, I'm mediating the dispute, which means they're not mediating the dispute, which means they're not learning how to deal with other people. And they are learning that the world is so scary that an authority needs to protect me from it at all times. That is the lesson that our culture teaches our kids today.
Yeah.
That there better be a mom and dad or a mom and dad like figure there to protect you from the risks and the bumps and the bruises and the mean people of the world. And that's a lie. That's not true. That's not going to work. Like you go out into the world and you get fired from a job, or or you aren't up to your own expectations. Like sometimes the biggest bully in our lives is ourself. Like, what do you do about that? What do you do
Oh,
when
man.
you're beating yourself
Yeah.
up over things? And I think I do think we need more talk. We need to find a new equilibrium that recognizes um, that we have to be emotionally
Yeah.
intelligent, but doesn't infantilize the whole society and treat everybody like teacup babies that need to be coddled and protected and wrapped in bubble wrap at every turn.
Yeah, no, man, you and I have like sort of similar hobby horses here, and ways in which we want to talk about these things. What else should our listeners know about Dad Saves America? Where can they find it? How can they sign up when there's alerts and all that, or new episodes?
So we've launched on YouTube. That's our main platform, youtube.com/Dad Saves America. But if you want to really get connected to what we're doing, learn more, or even make a donation as a nonprofit enterprise, you can go to dadsavesamerica.com, and there's a subscribe button for our email newsletter and a donate button if you want to become a partner in helping us get the word out. And we're aiming to publish new content every week. And so if you've got ideas for subjects that you'd be interested in hearing more about as a dad, as a parent, or as a kid, I really encourage you to go to the website or go into the comments section of our videos and let us know.
Great. Well, John, I've appreciated what you've put out so far, and I'm looking forward to more. And I appreciate you coming on to talk with us.
I appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. Thanks, man.